that he had been doing in other properties. One was the orphanage. I can't take you to the orphanage because it's living quarters at the moment. In fact, my son and I are in the orphanage, probably back where we belong. And my son's very intrigued by where we are because he thinks, I bet there's ghosts up here. But the other activity was the printing press. Now, Quilliam has actually donated the money for the printing press when he first attracted the attention of the wider Muslim world, and the donation came from the Muslims of Malaysia, and they funded the printing press. This is an Arab printing machine around about 1880, and although it's not the original machine as used by Quilliam, we don't have that. This is the same model machine. So I found this in a barn covered in hay bales in West Derbyshire. And we went up and collected it from the farmer, and I could write a chapter about how we got it in here because that's heavy. That's a ton of metal. Yes, I was present when we got it off the truck, and even that was an adventure. I wasn't present when it got into the building. From this or similar printed machine to this is called an Arab machine, and it's called an Arab because basically the technology works. You put these little silver letters of the alphabet in, and you lay out so you do your laying out of your print. But basically you set it because when it comes over and back, it's back to front and upside down. So in other words, it duplicates the Arabic language. So that when this machine was made, it was called the Arab. And this was basically the only machine that did newspapers, the Arab. Because it's a circular machine, and in America and Europe until electricity was discovered, when they went electric. So from this machine, Quilliam printed for 25 years, once a week, an 8-page newspaper called The Crescent. I have the whole lot. I've read them 3 times. I've read them through doing my work research, and probably I'll do the 4th time. Because there's just so much information. You can imagine 25 years of a weekly newspaper, describing the activities of the community, articles from the Muslim world, comparative religion. I mean, you name it. There's poetry. There's everything in there. It's a typical learned Victorian newspaper with an Islamic feel. But he also did the Islamic World, which was a monthly journal. But that was more intellectual, kind of intellectual learning articles about Islam and the Islamic world. And his books were all printed from a machine like this. Yeah, it kind of works, but it needs a bit of work on it. I often tell people that, there are people who know how these things work, and my wife is one of them. She knows exactly how these work. She said, "Well, once you've got it repaired and sorted, she said, I'll come up and I'll give demonstrations to people." But I saw last night, I got a message last night from a Muslim woman who's an artist, and she uses these kinds of machines for creating her contemporary artwork. Because I said to her, I don't know, because she said, "Oh, I'm really excited you got one of those," and she didn't tell me she used it. And I said, "You'll have fun with this one, it weighs a ton." And then she sent me a picture of her machine. She said, "I do use one of those, and that's way more than a ton." So yeah. Anyway, we're going to go down, and then we're going to go up, and that will be finished the tour. So we found these behind the range. So from here, when at the end of Ramadan, the food for breaking the daily fast and the month of Ramadan would have been done from this kitchen, and also the Eid feasts would have been done from this kitchen. But what is unique about this kitchen in terms of celebrations is that our Christmas will be different. And what he did is on Christmas Day, he would send the members of the community out into the city to find beggars and street children, homeless children. And they were all brought back here on Christmas Day and fed. And on the main peak of that activity, it's recorded by a journalist that around about 500 street children and some elderly beggars were being fed from this mosque. and all the members of the community would serve the food. And we know even what he gave them. He gave them hot tea, homemade bread rolls, and hot soup. So, you know, and I just think that's such a, you know, I think for me that's amazing. You know, and then of course being a sharp man, he was a journalist, he would bring the media in and he would say to them, you know, look, while all you guys are feasting, this is what we Muslims do on Christmas Day, we feed the poor. Yeah, he said, and then he would say, don't you think really that the prophets, people like Jesus or Muhammad, they would probably have fed the poor rather than feasting. You know, so, not that Jesus would have celebrated his own birthday probably. So yeah, so this is the kitchen. This, I hate it because obviously it's fire eggs, but behind this is the original beams, and you get the hooks that would have suspended these pots, in traditional kind of Victorian kitchen style. But again, this is a room to be restored. We want to restore the range, and maybe we can even get some kind of alternative method of fire regulation so we can get the old beams back. So now to the very top. Well, that's what it looked like. I think probably that was taken when we came in, when the mosque, and you start to see that. Yeah, I don't even know. To be honest, I don't know when that photograph was taken. It may have been even taken maybe before even that.
But it was just been a contract from Colin. See somebody switches brew on him. You don't want too much clay, you know. This is the same one spot. So much clay is the same one, isn't it?
No, there should be a little hole. No, they don't hold it. No, they should have a chimney.
Yes, and this was Quilliam's first classroom. And we know that probably no one was going to be that interested to send their children to the school. And so in order to, in a sense, demonstrate his conviction, he put his own children, he was the first pupils, the first students. He had 8 children, and so there were, in fact we know from the records that not all the children had desks, some of them were just sitting on benches. And from here he began really with his school, and the converts started to send their children to the school, the younger ones, and he finally managed to get the next room became the girls' classroom, girls' school, and this one then became the boys' school. And certainly although it was a very humble beginning, he had a couple of very good teachers. There was a convert called, I've lost him now, Hashim Wild, who was actually a qualified, had been a former headmaster, and he came and taught. He was the teacher who would have sat here. And by the time you get into the beginning of the 20th century, the school is successful enough that Liverpool College was accepting the students. And of course Liverpool College went on to become Liverpool University. So, and there were even some children who came from Muslim countries to study in Quilliam's school. So there's a few. So it all began in this room with Quilliam's own children sitting, facing Mr. Wilde and being taught. The curriculum was not a traditional Islamic madrasa curriculum. It was a British Victorian school curriculum, but it added into it elements of teaching them their faith, so it was, in fact, because of that faith element, I think we're perfectly justified in saying this is Britain's first madrasa, first Islamic school. Now, so now the last room, and we're going across. This would have been the room I would have done second to the mosque, and I think you would have seen why I was kind of building. I would have been building you up. And then, of course, 9 and 10 came, and the expansion could take place. I love this particular gallery. I think it's absolutely spectacular, and I just can't wait to start doing stuff in here. Not a lot, but this will become the main gallery of the museum and heritage centre. And now I have two curators who are going to be working with me, because I'm not a curator, I'm an historian. It's different. But there's been a recent appointment of a Muslim woman to Manchester, both the Manchester Museum and now to Liverpool Museum. So we have two Muslima or Muslim females who are curators. So they're ready to come and work with me, and we'll create a museum gallery. So this will have obviously the history of the photographs and records of Quilliam's community, but we'll extend it through so we actually show the history of the Muslim presence in Liverpool from that time to the modern times. You can see the work that's being done now, and a lot of people say, "Oh, you've been so slow," but to restore these buildings, it's really not easy, and anyone who's had a go at it will know it's not. The fireplaces are original, all through here now. The fireplaces were taken out, they were restored, and we still have more of them. I've got 3 bagged for the next restored ones, because for the rooms I'm working on downstairs in the school, we want the fireplaces in. So they are absolutely beautiful in my view, but the secret in here really is hidden from people's eyes. All of this is original, except where it was so rotten it couldn't be, and you had to, and where possible, the original glass was kept. So some of them were broken, but restoring all of these original windows, even in itself, is a huge task. And if you see the unpainted piece of plaster, that's not modern plaster, and nor is any of this. It had to be done with Victorian plaster to keep the listed building status. We were watched very carefully. The plaster is made of lime and horsehair, and the horsehair was bought from Chester. So it takes ages to do this stuff. It's like sauce in it, everything. And we have a whole separate warehouse where even now we have all the old, the skirting boards, the doors, and the floorboards, and we're still in the process of restoring, and once they're restored, they can be brought back and we can start doing the floors. But it takes, and you're watched all the time. So you really have to do it properly.
So do you have to give notice to the council every time you introduce the teacher and keeping within?
Yeah. And of course it costs a lot too.
Yeah.
So you're constantly fundraising.
What date you're aiming to finish?
In my lifetime. That's what actually it's more than that. It's not only in my lifetime, it's why I've got the energy to do it, so but no, we want to make a big significant move next year. But it probably won't be this gallery, it'll probably be just bringing the house number 8 back. That's my task for next year. Then we'll see what happens after that. Hopefully I'll still be
The Covens are reproduction though, isn't it?
Huh?
The Covens are reproduction.
Yeah, some of the Covens are.
So have they been moulded from the original?
Yeah. Some of them are the original.
Yeah.
Some of them have been remoulded. And all of that takes a huge amount of time.
It does.
So it's finding the craftspeople, isn't it? The people with those skills.
And they're getting less and less.
Dying trades, aren't they? Literally. Exactly.
And as they get less and less, they get more costly to get. So it's like but what we know from this building, this particular room, from this window, the prayer call was made. And so it's probably the first time in the history that publicly the Muslim prayer call was made from the building and went
How
out.
did they do that?
Okay, they have you heard the prayer call?
Downstairs.
They were doing it. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the call to prayer.
Right.
And this was done by a gentleman called Mr. Radford. He was the first caretaker. He lived upstairs and looked after the whole building. And he would come down and make the prayer call from this window, with the window open, so it went out onto the street. And he'd be dressed, he had really fine whiskers actually. I envy his Victorian beard and whiskers, magnificent. And he would wear his fez, but otherwise Victorian clothes, and he would come down and do the prayer call from here. That attracted, when you heard on the video about razor wires and things being thrown, it was the prayer call really that caused that to happen. But I have a wonderful story which I tell of a meeting really of cultures, because Quilliam would put at the Eid feasts, the major feasts of Islam, he would put all the flags of the Ottoman world down this gallery on these windows. So one time they had just done the call and they were all gathering the members, and they were going to have their feast for it, and I think it was, I do know which feast it is, it's gone out of my head, it's one of the Eids anyway, and a circus came into town. So right down this street, the circus processed through. So of course Victorian circuses, they don't have the same regs as today's. You had lions, tigers, elephants, everything all going down. So all the members were looking out the window, at the circus. So right at the end of the circus, the last part of the procession, there was a whole troop of Arab Bedouin camel riders who performed acrobatics on their camels. And they were Muslims. And they were of course like, what's going on up there? And everyone else was looking at, oh wow, look, camel riders. So someone turned around to Quilliam and said, should we send someone down to tell them, that they could, because everyone was shouting out the windows, Assalamu alaikum, and they were shouting back up, Assalamu alaikum salam. So Quilliam turned around and he said, I don't think we have to. He said, I think they're going to find their way back here tonight anyway. And that night all these camel riders did all turn up and joined in with the Eid, with the feast. But I always think it's just such a sort of like the cultural, exchange that kind of represents is so wonderful. So that's the end of your talk. Normally I'd be taking you back into the mosque, but it's, yes, spot on. It's prayer time just starting. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. You can see the pelmet up there as well, with the Ottoman symbols. But have a wander through by all means.
So you want to initially the outside wall?